live streaming this, I believe. So there may be others that are on that platform. And if you want to ask a question, you have to do it through the question and answers button, not the chat, because we just had some logistical issues with trying to get to everyone. So if you'll just focus on the Q and A's there, and we'll try to rip through them as fast as we can. Um, a couple of really good updates that I wanted to share with everyone. We have been chomping at the bit for the best part of what 9 months now in trying to in hoping that the DEA is going to move on the recommendation that was submitted by the FDA back on July 29th of 2025. And we're hearing some pretty good confirmable rumors that they're very close now. They're doing some last minute evaluations, and we're hopeful that they'll have it wrapped up here in the next couple of weeks and that we'll see some real progress there. We're equally hopeful that the FDA is going to make the needed adjustments to the FDA and Kratom website, because that is a catalyst for so many of the state enforcement actions that rely upon what is a poorly framed description of Kratom and its regulatory status at the federal level. And some of these states have very confusing food laws that interact with the FDA Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, which creates a lot of confusion along the way. So we've got some real hopeful signs that we're finally getting close to the end of the road on that score. And interestingly, the bill that was filed a week and a half or 2 weeks ago by Representative Bilirakis from Florida to the Ban 708 Act, I think it's HR 8000, that apparently was done at the request of the Department of Health and Human Services and FDA to prod the DEA along, because they've been frustrated that there's been a lack of action. And so that intersection with the federal agencies kind of pushing each other along is a good thing, I think, overall. So we're hopeful that that movement on both of those issues, the scheduling of 708 products and follow-on synthetics by the DEA, and then of course the FDA website update. There are some states that, if you've been tracking the emails that have been sent to you, I call them the hotspot states. I'll just give you a quick update on these. They're rolling fast, and so please stay alert for the emails. Do everything you can to respond to those emails with the specific instructions that we're providing to you. Sometimes they change depending on the circumstances, but some of those hotspots today are the state of Kentucky. That's obviously a bill that is currently sitting with the governor's office. I think that you have a request that you submit emails to the governor's office and phone calls. We encourage you to do that, because the ban on kratom was inserted in the last day of the session in Kentucky, and it was put into what's called a revenue bill and sent over. It's a must-pass bill. Not a single public comment, no public hearings, nothing. They just slipped it in, and we're told it was done at the request of some substance abuse programs and perhaps some law enforcement people. But we need to have your voice heard by the governor, because he has some authority that he could veto this, even with a line item veto. We're hopeful that that applies in this particular circumstance. Some confusion on that score, but we're hopeful that that's the case. And I can tell you that in Tennessee, we're quickly getting to the same spot. On Wednesday, the Senate Finance Committee, and everyone should be emailing the Senate Finance Committee members, will hold their hearing before it goes to the floor in the Senate. And the purpose of that Finance Committee review would be to look at the current estimate of the fiscal note, which we know is substantially understated, because the fiscal analyst for the state of Tennessee used the data that's available for drug addicts that are on the SAMHSA website, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration here in Washington. They don't look at the average consumer. And when you use the correct methodology for determining the number of kratom consumers in a state, which is based on the prevalence data in the peer-reviewed published article that Oliver Grumman and his colleagues published. It's 9.1% of the population, which drives in the state of Tennessee, instead of having 38,000 kratom consumers, which we know is way underestimated, you actually have a population of 518,000. And that, of course, implicates sales tax revenue, the cost of incarceration from a ban bill, the cost of mental health services and substance abuse services, which could top $1 billion. And instead of there just being a fiscal note impact on the state of $1.2 million, just the sales tax losses at the state and local level, and the states have to reimburse the local level for state action that reduces the sales tax revenue, and the cost of incarceration, which are direct costs to the local arena. You're talking close to $20 million rather than 1.2 million. So obviously, we're hoping that the legislature wakes up to this, and certainly we want the governor to pay attention to this. So any support that you can provide in the state of Tennessee is we're grateful for. We also have a similar situation in the state of Kansas, where the bill has gone to the governor. The governor is sensitive to the issue about the fiscal impact, but more importantly, about the access that kratom consumers have to natural leaf kratom products, which are currently banned, rather than just focusing on the synthetics and the 7-OH products. So that's something that's of substantial concern, and we need your help there. And this list goes on. In the state of Iowa, we are focusing on the Senate right now for advocacy outreach. We think the Senate is far more interested in the appeals of the advocates than the House was. And so we think that's an important thing for us to be doing as well. We have some other states that are in play here. South Carolina, we had a fabulous turnout of advocates that showed up. Advocates do show up when there's proper notice given. They have time to schedule getting there. Advocates do show up because they believe in it, contrary to what some people are saying in the kratom community. And while there are challenges always associated with being able to get to a public hearing at the state legislature, including travel costs and distances and all of that, it is far better, higher participation level than what some people are claiming in the kratom community. And you can stay tuned on some of those issues as well. But obviously, South Carolina, we had a great outcome there. Now, the vote that was taken by the committee is not indicative of where we're going to be at the end on that process. In the state of Missouri, we're in a standoff with the 7-OH people, but the Missouri Attorney General announced that she's taking on the 7-OH people, so it provides a window for us to let the Attorney General do the kind of enforcement action that's necessary to protect consumers from these chemically manipulated and chemically engineered opioids that call themselves 7-OH and unfortunately often call themselves kratom, which of course they're not. We have a hearing coming up on Wednesday in New Hampshire. That one is targeted specifically to 7-OH products and synthetic products. We have a review of a bill that's coming up in Delaware, and it's right now a regulation bill. We're working with the sponsor to tweak some of it. She has borrowed from some of the older versions of the KCPA that we've learned a little bit about, so we're hopeful that she'll be interested in revising that. So those are some of the hot spots of the states that we're dealing with right now. I know that there are others that we need to pay attention to. And for example, it's not always legislation. In the state of Nevada, we got notice about a Board of Pharmacy hearing that will be held on the 16th of April, where they're going to have a work session on whether or not metrogenine should be considered a Schedule I substance. This will be the third go-around with the Board of Pharmacy in the state of Nevada. The current governor of Nevada is a Republican who vetoed our strengthened KCPA bill, and in his veto message made it clear that he believes that kratom itself is dangerous, and that's of course inconsistent with what the FDA has found. So we've got a very high hill to climb in Nevada. We're preparing for that work session, and we'll give advice on what we think, depending on the reaction from the Board of Pharmacy staff as to whether we can get a panel of experts and then look to the actual hearing when they authorize a hearing on banning kratom that will look for a really high level of consumer participation. But stay tuned on that one because we're watching it closely and we've got some work to do there. In the state of Rhode Island, on April the 1st, Rhode Island's ban on kratom was repealed. We have been encouraging the vendors to register and to sell products in the state of Rhode Island. It is a tough thing because the regulations are pretty tough, but it was in our discussions with the governor when he signed this bill. It was understood that this would be a year of experimentation about what things work and what do not, and we'll be able to go back in a year and make advocate for some changes that we know are going to have to be made. But the executive agencies and the Rhode Island government wanted to put some pretty tight restrictions on us, which we don't think and today do not believe are necessary along the way. There is a provision that a state legislator in the state of Rhode Island wants to add. Her name is Michelle McGaugh. She is a pharmacist. She hates kratom. She believes that it's dangerous, and she has been a persistent critic of kratom and throughout the process of repealing the ban and enacting the KCPA. This year, prior to April 1st, when this law took effect to repeal the ban, she had already put in legislation that would have required a retailer to install a cabinet where under lock and key, that was the only way that you could sell kratom products. And of course, that adds further to the stigma of purchasing a kratom product. It adds expenses to the retailer, constructively giving us a ban along the way. And so everything that she can do in order to interfere with the commerce of kratom for consumers who would benefit from it, she's all in on doing. She's not. I would say that she's not the typical legislator who would welcome input. When the hearing was held last year, prior to the passage of the KCPA that repealed the existing ban, she was very animated in the hearing and had made the claim that there's not enough evidence on kratom to justify repealing the ban. And she made the same assertion this year. Last year, in the hallway after the hearing, I made the offer to her that we could provide additional scientific evidence funded by the National Institutes on Drug Abuse. And she glared at me and said, "There's nothing that you can send to me that would change my mind about kratom." A pretty surprising position for a state legislator to have when it is her duty and obligation to represent her constituents, not to prosecute her personal bias against a product. But yet that's where she is currently. And during the testimony this year, when asked under cross-examination by a fellow colleague, member of the legislature, about what her objection to kratom was, and she said, well, because it hits the mu opioid receptor. And he said, well, this is Representative Brian Patrick Kennedy, who's a great champion of the kratom deregulation and removal of the ban, said, well, would you apply the same standard to any dietary supplement or food group that hits the mu opioid receptor? And she said, absolutely, I would. And of course, that includes many consumer products that hit the mu opioid receptor, including cheese. There is an ingredient in cheese that converts when it's ingested and it hits the mu opioid receptors. So she hasn't answered that question yet. I've challenged her with some press releases and we're working through it, but it just shows you how difficult that kind of thing is. So Rhode Island, we're grateful that Representative Brian Patrick Kennedy and Senator Hannah Gallo, along with the support of Speaker Shekarchi and Senate President Larson, there are a number of other legislators that helped on it, that we were able to, for the first ban bill to be repealed in the United States. We're hoping others will follow. But Rhode Island was obviously a great thing for us as we move forward there. One of the things that I have been asked over the past several weeks, and it occurred again today in a discussion I had with Senator Ricketts' staff, who was the principal author and who the senator who had circulated the letter for the signing of 11 United States senators that was celebrated by the anti-kratom community because in that letter these senators encouraged the FDA to consider banning all kratom. And in the conversation with the staff of Senator Ricketts this afternoon on Capitol Hill, they were very interested in learning about the difference between 7-hydroxymetrogenine and other synthetic products that are chemically manipulated and chemically engineered in order to be full-blown opioids, as described by FDA Commissioner McCary and Secretary Kennedy. Uh, the staff member was surprised, very interested in learning more, accepted a number of the scientific studies that I presented to her that were funded by the National Institutes on Drug Abuse. And so it opened the door and opened her eyes to where they might have benefited from having a more balanced approach to the evidence and data that supports the safety of kratom. But the bottom line, the bottom line is this. There is no middle ground that anyone in the kratom community should entertain as being a basis for allowing the 7-OH people to live and let live. And I know that there are some people who advocate for the position that while they're not advocating for a 7-OH vendor, they do think that people should be able to use whatever products they want and that they should not be subject to any ban on any product. Well, let me tell you, that is the death knell for the kratom natural leaf plant products. Because if you say that, exactly what's sweeping the nation right now are the circumstances where states are mixing the two together. I sat last week in Nashville, Tennessee, and was the designated opponent of the Tennessee ban, and the representative of the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations sat as the proponent supporter of the kratom ban, and he testified that kratom causes euphoria. I explained that I had just taken a little over 2 grams of kratom 45 minutes before I testified because I fell and hurt my hip really bad and my back, and that I wasn't feeling any sense of euphoria. So how could he make that claim? And of course, I think I was speaking coherently in testifying before the committee. But the TBI guy said, oh, no, it causes euphoria. He then went on to add one example after another of the dangers of kratom. He said, you cannot tell the difference between kratom and 7-OH. He said, we just can't tell. So you've got to ban it all. And the only reason that there has to be a difference between natural kratom leaf products and 7-OH products is because 7-OH products entered the marketplace in 2024 or mid 2025, calling themselves kratom, confusing every law enforcement officer, confusing coroners and medical examiners, confusing substance abuse clinics, confusing the poison control centers because they couldn't tell the difference. And it was only, for example, when the poison control centers in March of last year finally woke up to the reality that there was a difference, that they entered into a separate category. So when people call in, they see that the reports are either 7-OH or a synthetic versus natural leaf kratom. They haven't quite gotten everybody to do it the right way because they continue to have misstatements about the levels of kratom and 7-OH. When the Utah ban bill was defeated, but the onerous regulation bill was passed, they had the state medical examiner's office up there testifying before the Utah legislature saying that it's just hard to tell the difference, and that while there was polysubstance abuse and there were synthetic products, they just couldn't tell which was which. And again, the only reason that that conundrum exists, the single reason, is because 7-OH is on the marketplace. And here's the critical factor. Should 7-OH be there? It's not about whether or not you say, oh, well, it's okay for people, take this very libertarian view that people should be able to use whatever they want, and you certainly shouldn't have a ban on any substance. The truth is that the standard for market entry under the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act has one defining purpose, and that is to protect the health and safety of consumers in America. And there is a specific requirement that prior to market entry, that the specific criteria for market entry is that you have to have a reasonable basis for safety under the conditions of use. That's a specific standard. It means you have to prove that your labeling, the product formulation is safe, and that the specific labeling instruction that you provide is accurate. And that's the basis for market entry. And the 70H, the Hart Group chief scientific officer, stood publicly in a forum that was organized for the purpose of examining this issue by the American Kratom Association and said, we didn't have that information. And we still don't. Now, that was in late 2024. They hope to have something in 2025, and certainly by 2026. They did not have it prior to market entry. And the other problem is that if you look at the marketing that's being done by the 70H people, you don't hear them saying, oh, you can use 70H as a replacement for a cup of coffee, which 1/3 of Kratom consumers do in America. You don't hear them saying, well, you could take 7-OH at a little higher dose and you're going to feel relief of the symptoms of a little bit of anxiety, which another third of the American kratom consumers use. What you hear is that 7-OH people market their products solely on the basis of the therapeutic benefits that come for the management of acute and chronic pain. And that is why they are recommending that the only place that you should be able to buy kratom products today, this is the 7-OH people advocating for this, is in a 21 plus store, meaning that the only people that can get into a store that is selling these kratom products are people that are over 21. And they say that they all should be put behind the counter, and they have no problem with them being behind a lock and key. Well, that's great for the 1/3 of the kratom consumers who use it for acute and chronic pain, but it's 100% virtually of the 7-OH community, and the other 2/3 of natural kratom leaf consumers are excluded from that paradigm, stigmatizing them if they would even go into those kind of establishments, and certainly eliminating a broad swath of the natural kratom leaf product formulations. So anyone who sits and says, oh, I'm just going to let them do what they want to do, we don't want to have bans, you're making a mistake, because that is the nail in the coffin for natural kratom leaf to be banned, because they're going to confuse it, they being the 7-OH people. They're going to mislabel their products just like they did in 2024 and 25 when they came on the market. They're going to actually say, as Vince Sanders did in testimony before the Rhode Island House of Representatives, when he recommended that the safe serving size of 7-OH products is 28 milligrams. 28 milligrams. They don't have the safety for 1 milligram, and yet they're up there promoting it. It was the same Vince Sanders who sat before the Massachusetts legislature in a committee hearing and said, you could take 2 pounds of 7-OH in a bowl, he said, and I can consume it right now and I'd have no ill effects. Now, does anyone believe that? A legislator caught me in the hallway afterwards and said, well, let's let him do it. Let's get 2 pounds of 7-OH. Let's hook him up to all the vital sign machines, and we'll know exactly the moment when he dies, because he surely will die from taking that kind of 7-OH. And we know that that's likely true when you look at the effects that 7-OH has. You can go to the FDA's the FDA and 7-OH webpage, and you can see the documentation they have about the effects that people are experiencing in this highly addictive, very potent product that binds to the mu-opioid receptors in a very strong fashion. But even for them, the 7-OH manufacturers, it wasn't good enough, because they wanted the addictive effects to drive consumer sales to be higher. So they created sublingual chewable tablets and strips. That's what they did. And they said in testimony before the California legislature that they believed that those kind of products should be gone, and that they were no longer being sold in the 7-OH marketplace. 2 or 3 days later, I ordered the sublingual strips, the sublingual tablets, the chewable tablets that dissolve in your mouth, and the MGM 14 and 15. I had those products delivered to the offices of the American Kratom Association, so they're not even screening for who they send it to, and they all arrived after they were supposedly no longer being sold on the marketplace today. So what that shows, I believe, is the 7-OH people will say and do anything that they need to do in order to maintain their market presence in the marketplace today. They have to be held accountable. And that's just the way it is. Now, I would also point out that there are some in the advocacy space for the 7OH who openly mocked me for saying that 7OH is manufactured using the high concentration chlorine in baking soda, the same chlorine that you use in shocking your backyard pool. There is a podcast group that said, "Oh, that is ridiculous. How could anyone say that? I mean, that's just ridiculous that anyone would think that that's the way that these things are said." And they mocked me and Chris McCurdy for saying it. But here's the problem: Chris McCurdy and I didn't say it. It was said by Vince Sanders, who is one of the principal 7OH manufacturers in the United States, and he's the one that said publicly that that is the way we manufacture our products. He said it is pull shock chemicals, high concentration chlorine with baking soda added. And yet, this is what happens when you have the tolerance for 7OH. 7OH is ruining the experience for kratom consumers. And the 7OH people like to say, oh, well, this is just a turf war between battles. No, it's a safety war. And the safety war is protecting the average kratom, the pure leaf kratom consumers versus those that are taking a highly concentrated, chemically manipulated, and products that are engineered to deliver the opioid effects because they are, as Commissioner McCary said, a full-blown opioid. This battle will continue until the kratom community rises up and said, we're done. We were duped in 2024 and 25 with a whole range of products that called themselves kratom that were actually heavily synthesized or semi-synthesized 7OH products. And they continued to manipulate and deceive the consumers until they finally got caught. And then they said, oh, well, now we can start calling them 7OH. And there's all kinds of names that are being scheduled or used now. And then, of course, they've gone to the pseudodoxils and the MGM 1516. And now I understand there's a lot of other variants in between, all of which are dangerous products that have been documented by the FDA as being unsafe products and the consumer should not be exposed to. And that's why we're seeing all of these ban bills because of that manipulation of the marketplace. So with that, I'm going to stop and we'll go to the Q&A side of this and we'll see what questions people are asking along in terms of this. So Jeff says, I love the weekly update you do with Misty and Jennifer. Thanks for all you do, Mac. That was great. They recommended that I do a segment that just update the community. So Jeff, thank you. I'm glad to join them. It won't be every week, but it'll be most weeks. I'm going to try to do it as best I can. Josh asked, do you know if the ban bill in Kentucky will disallow mail orders or only prevent kratom from being sold in retail shops? It was a one-line insertion that bans all kratom. And so I think in that circumstance, it's going to ban everything. If it's the possession of it and including the sales that will be a problem. So I think that that's a real problem for us along the way. Adam asked, is this an emergency recommendation so they can do studies in the meantime? I'm not sure whether you mean federally or state. If it's a federal level, we obviously they can do studies, albeit through some limitations, although there was a bill passed in the legislature in July of last year, or in the Congress in July of last year, that allows for more relaxed standards for scheduling. So if 7OH is scheduled at the federal level, they will have the opportunity to come in and do what they should have done in the first place, and that is to go through clinical trials to produce what they think is a clinically significant drug, and that would require all of that being done. So Adam, I hope I answered that question. Adam also asked, does the DA schedule cover similar drugs like 15OH or whatever the hell they plan on coming out with in the future? It's hard for them to do that. And in fact, I think the delay by the DEA in looking at this is attributable to the very fact that the FDA was unable to provide the kind of evidence and data that's required in order to document scheduling. So the DEA would have to allow for some coverage of additional synthetic products in some fashion, but it probably won't cover all the really bad ones that are out there. But at least we'll have a more educated public while the DEA wrestles with that and does additional scheduling on those products themselves. So I think that's the right answer to that one, Adam. Thank you for the question. Dana asked, can we write letters for states we don't live in? Also, what do I do for phone calls? Do I ask to speak to someone, leave a message? So at the federal level, you want to ask for the staffer that handles FTA issues. At a state legislative level, rarely does a state legislator have more than one, maybe sometimes two staffers. You simply, when you make the phone call, tell them the bill number that you're calling about and your either opposition or support to it, depending on whether it's a regulatory bill we support or a scheduling bill for 708, which we support, but not for kratom, natural leaf kratom. So I think that's what we want to do. And these are always important conversations to have. Phone calls work, and you should do them, and emails work as well in order to get the volume of the number of hits on an office by a legislator to a legislator. And so I encourage you to do it. Rand says Minnesota appears to be advancing in age regulation. Good, absolutely. The ban bill is dead in Minnesota. We do have a regulatory bill. We're working with the sponsor. She's not quite there yet to go where we need to be, but she is willing at this point to just consider an age limitation. And we need a little more clarification about what a kratom product is, distinguished from what the Minnesota Department of Agriculture claims is a food that is not permitted under the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, and how it overlays onto Minnesota law. So a little more work to do there, but we're making some good progress. Mandy said, why do you think there are so many states being targeted all over once all of a sudden? One word, 70H. This is the problem in this industry, and anybody that has their heads in the sand and doesn't see it and doesn't understand it or tries to marginalize it or excuse it doesn't know what they're talking about. We were on track to have more than 25 states pass the KCPAs this year, and now we're immersed in this confusion because of what 7OH has done to this marketplace, in the same way that the 7OH manufacturers deceived the public in 2024 and 25. They have deceived legislators in the same way, and regulators at both the state and the local levels, because nobody can tell the difference. And it's on their backs for doing it. And that's why, Mandy, that we have all this problem. Don says, I've been working on all states. I've called the Kentucky governor's office. Great. What I was unclear is how to email it, or is it the page that says contact me? You have to do it that way. Just get on there and put in the information on the contact page, because that's what will work for you. But certainly keep calling. Thank you for doing so. She said that she'll continue to call around because a lot of people do not know about Kentucky because they just snuck it in. They did. And snuck it in, and one out of all the businesses knew this was happening. I'm calling and emailing for every state that needs help, but I'm trying to keep it all I need to do to keep it straight. Thank you. And you can email and call from other states too. That's not always favored by the state representatives or the governors, but you can do it. And unless you get blocked from doing it, I would encourage you to do so. Rand says midterm elections can fundamentally change the political landscape. Does a potential shakeup in state legislatures fill you with any hope? No, only because of this. Kratom is not the most important, probably not on the top 20 issues that anyone's going to deal with. Now, it does become important once a bill is filed and it starts to move through, but it's not necessarily going to be a significant campaign issue in midterm elections. The exception will be if it becomes an issue of controversy where perhaps a legislator in a previous legislative session who's an incumbent is challenged by someone that's running against them, and they don't like the position they took on kratom. So obviously that might be the outlier, but I don't think it has a lot of legs in terms of making a fundamental change in the political landscape. But I would hope so. But again, it's just not the most important issue in terms of the priority of issues. Typically, midterm election electorates are concerned about their pocketbooks, and kratom's just not on that particular landscape right now. Nick says, any updates with California? Has a hearing been scheduled in the Senate committee for AB 1088? Assemblywoman Baines sent a letter to the FDA and to the governor. We're working on with the governor's office and trying to help him moderate the issue about kratom so he understands it better. The Department of Public Health in California has poisoned the well there, and they've made him believe. And guess what? The governor's office in California, the staffer told me, well, we have to get rid of this synthesized stuff. Yeah, 7-OH. That's our problem. And unfortunately, we're going to have to continue to fight uphill on all of these issues going forward. Rand says Minnesota again, an age regulation sponsor mentioned that they want to work through 2026 to tighten up regulations on kratom. Do you get the sense this pertains to 7-OH? No, that their lobbyists have been with the Minnesota legislature. The 7-OH lobbyists are in every state. They have money that's unbelievable, and they're making our lives miserable because we can't match them on dollars. But where we beat them soundly is on the science and the evidence. And so we're sharing it as best we can. We rely upon advocates to do this, to help us. It's critically important that you jump into the fray and do that for us. The Minnesota sponsor that I'm talking to on our bill really isn't, it doesn't have an appetite to expand the regulatory framework. She just wants to get the age bill done and then look at the regulatory bill next year. Rand says, as far as the federal kratom regulation, I'm aware of Mark Pocan and Cory Booker being longtime allies. Are we in touch with the folks on a similar cloud to prepare? We are immersed in what I think is a final resolution on how the language can be addressed in the context of the DSHEA Act, the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act. It's not going to be something that the dietary supplement industry likes, and so we may have to just bite the bullet and take what we get on that. And we're going to be in there fighting. But Cory Booker and Mark Pocan have been great advocates for us. We're going to run into a little bit of resistance with respect to the 7-OH provisions, but I think that once we are able to explain it to them and give them the data about the safety factors, I think they'll be fine. We'll see how that goes. Brian says, I attended a Judiciary Committee hearing in South Carolina last week and was very proud of the large turnout of passionate kratom advocates. What's next in the legislative process in South Carolina? We're going to go through a couple of other steps that includes a hearing on the other body in the South Carolina legislature. There may be another committee hearing. There'll be a full committee hearing on the House side. I completely agree with your assessment that it was a fabulous turnout. The messages were powerful. And despite the outcome, which is not always indicative of what the legislators actually believe, but because of the back and forth and people coming in and out of the meeting, they moved it to the next level of committees. But I think we'll have a better luck there. I believe we'll have a better luck there. Michael says, it doesn't seem like our state and town lawmakers share the same opinion as Nora Volko about availability in gas stations despite age gating. I know they don't. The stigma is permanently stained. Is there any talk of regulation to only have kratom sold in 21 plus older establishments such as sleazy smoke shops, which seems to be like the only shop alternative? It just seems like with all the major heat, you'd think everyone would go back to online business only. So Michael, you raised a couple of issues. One, the reality is that Nora Volko is right on the issue, meaning that it is not about where you buy it, it's about the product formulation. So if you have a product that is properly regulated, that the formulation is limited under the regulations that are offered in that state, as long as they're formulated properly, they're tested, and that they're labeled properly and age gated, it doesn't matter. And if you trust a convenience store to sell cigarettes, which has a much higher risk profile for safety of a consumer product, or alcohol, then you can trust the natural kratom leaf products. You shouldn't be able to trust 7-OH, not because it shouldn't be regulated in the same way, but because it's a dangerous opioid. It is engineered, chemically manipulated and deliberately engineered to be an opioid and have those effects. And that's what we're struggling with right now. Michael goes on to say, I get it, reputable vendors, financial impact. I understand about the street addict and no beds available, but we cannot save everyone. I agree with that. I feel we may have the ability to do damage control by not standing out as and continue drawing this massive, unfair, negative attention. I wish we had a golden strategy because it feels like the sky is falling, walls closing in. I know it's frustrating, and I've seen exactly what you're talking about, Michael. I think that we need to stay the course where we are right now because we are winning the day. And when we can eliminate 7OH, and if the DEA does their job, that will be the policy argument that we'll be able to make. And then it goes back to what is the safety profile of natural kratom leaf products? Stephen said, should we be contacting the Tennessee governor alongside the committee now or wait for the governor until if it moves? So I have talked to the chief of staff in the governor's office. We're trying to get a meeting with the governor personally. We think the fiscal note is the key factor there. We need to focus on the Senate for now, but we're going to shift pretty quickly to the governor's office as soon as we get the signal that they're not going to ask, the Senate will not ask for a revised fiscal note, which they should do. So stand by for that, but we're going to be in the governor's ear here in just a few days. Then Stephen asked, can you speak briefly to the Ohio KCPA and the Ohio Board of Pharmacy? So the Ohio KCPA, there's some states that are in session for most of the year, and they tend to be much slower than the states that have very fast, schedules. And a state like Utah is 45 days. Most of the states have 3 or 4 month sessions. So Ohio tends to be slower, as does Massachusetts, New Jersey, some of the other states, North Carolina. So we have to work on the KCPAs in their regular order, which is frustratingly slow, but we continue to work there. And we're on track in Ohio for getting the KCPA passed. The Ohio Board of Pharmacy has formally commenced and is in the process of the 7OH ban. They have not yet published the regular rulemaking for metrogenine, and we don't know what the delay is on that, but we expect it. And when that happens, then it will go through a hearing, which we're going to ask advocates to jump in and help us with. And then it will go to a legislative committee called the JCAR Committee, the Joint Commission on Rules or something, and they will have a say in whether or not the rule proceeds. So we're gonna work hard on that. Um, Melody asked, do we have a DC date? We're talking about a congressional briefing. We should have that concluded by by the end of this week, and it will be in May. We're negotiating on the actual confirmation of the room. We have a verbal confirmation, but we don't have a written confirmation yet. So Melody, look in the next day or so, and we'll certainly have it by the end of the week, and it'll be in mid-May. When we do this, it will be in the Capitol Visitor Center. It'll be a two day process, and the first day will be where we have a hill visit by a fly-in by Kratom advocates, and we're going to put up a section on our website where people, advocates who want to come, they're looking for some assistance, can ask for vendors to help them, and so we'll see how that plays out. We hope we'll get a lot that way. But the reality is that not everybody's going to be able to be funded because there's a limited amount of funding by the vendors. So we'll just do the best we can on that. Stephen said, should we? Oh, I've already done that. Jason says, is there a veterans advocacy group that I can join here in Texas? We have Kratom Safe for Veterans. I can't remember the exact title. John Shinholzer runs our veterans program with the AKA. You certainly should join that. And then we're identifying in the individual states where there are kratom groups who will help us. But certainly, Jason, reach out, just email the AKA, and we'll connect you with John Chinholzer and his group. Um, I think I've already answered, Paul, I've answered the meeting in DC. Brian says, what is the status of the bill brought by U.S. Congressman Ricketts? Ricketts did not bring a bill. He wrote a letter. The bill was filed by Congressman Bill Aracas from Florida, and that went through a hearing that was generalized to a number of potentially dangerous substances. And we think the effects on the DEA will be substantial to kind of prod them to action. We hope that's the case, but it'll otherwise go through the natural order. So a number of hearings and then up for votes in the House and then move over to the Senate. John says, any info on the action plan on Scranton, Pennsylvania? I just did an interview with a reporter just about an hour ago on Scranton. Obviously, bad information. It is incredible how they mix the two substances, natural leaf kratom and 7-OH. They don't know the difference. And the reporter was reading to me the actual ordinance and then some of the statements made by the council people, and you could tell they were conflating the two. Again, 7-OH is the problem, not naturally kratom. So we're going to keep working on that. So, John, thank you for the question. And we should have an alert out on Scranton that you should look in your inbox, and hopefully you will be able to do it. It'll be a 2-week process. They meet tomorrow, and then they meet a week from now before it becomes final. So we're going to have to be mobilized. Kevin says we need to mobilize like 2016. This is so devastating. What can we do to mobilize a large federal push to highlight the massive destruction of 7-OH and all the synthetics? They're not kratom at all. I was given a 14 milligram tablet of 7-OH and it felt like an oxycodone pill. Then this is ridiculous. I agree. I've been consuming kratom for over a decade, and these products are no way, shape, or form kratom. Agreed. And you need to tell that to the legislators that you contact. We are going to have to mobilize as we did in 2016, an even larger group now because we've grown so substantially. So that's sort of the business end of what we're doing. We need help, and do not succumb to this nonsense that are peddled by some who say, "Oh, we're just for kratom too. We just don't think you should ban 7-OH." Those people are going to be our death knell, and so obviously we want to fight back and protect the natural kratom leaf product. Mike says, have you heard any updates on the Kentucky ban bill since it got to the governor's desk? No, that just he's considering our positions. There were letters sent to him today, to the Kentucky governor and to the Kansas governor, from Dr. Rahul Gupta, who's the former director of the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy, who himself is a Democrat, was there during the Biden administration. Hopefully that will have impact on the Kentucky and Kansas governors. We also had a letter sent by Representative Brian Patrick Kennedy from Rhode Island, telling these governors not to make the same mistake that Rhode Island did, that kratom doesn't meet the scientific criteria for scheduling, and it certainly has all the negative side effects to the population of legitimate kratom consumers. So we hope that that'll be the case. Mary asked, what is the latest update on Minnesota? I've already given that. On Michigan, we have a real battle on our hands because the Michigan speaker yanked our bill out of committee, took a kratom ban bill, put it on the floor, killed our bill in the committee, put obviously the ban bill, and he used a rarely used rule in the Michigan House where he forced all of the representatives to stay in their seats until they passed the bill that he was demanding they pass. And overwatching it was that watching over all of this was Patty Wheeler, who claims that her son died of kratom, and that, of course, is an open question about the various cocktail of drugs that he may or may not have been on. And she was watching over the actual vote by the legislature in Michigan. So very disastrous. Now, my understanding is that our appeals to the Senate are having a real impact, and it will go to a committee for a review, and it's not a slam dunk for the Speaker of the House there because I think he overplayed his hand, and we're going to continue to work on this hard. Um, uh, let's see. Matthew says, "What did you say happened in South Carolina?" This is recorded, and so I'm just going to encourage you to watch it later rather than repeat this because I've talked about what happened down in South Carolina a couple of times. John says, "Any traction in KCPA in Pennsylvania?" It was tabled last month, but we have another meeting with the staff that's scheduled for, I think, next week. Maybe it's this week, a Thursday. Maybe it's next week. But anyway, we're working on that, John. Thank you for the question. And we're still alive and well in Pennsylvania. There's an appetite for a regulatory bill to protect consumers. Melanie says, anything going on with Paxton, the AG of Texas, and the lawsuit he filed, and that's got to do with 7-OH. Attorney General Paxton and his staff have been fabulous. They're leaning hard on the 7-OH people. Litigation takes a while, but it is a great signal to the legislature in Texas that has a session coming up in January of this year. So I think that that's a very positive step for us. Robert asks, can I send a letter of testimonial to the state official in a state other than where I live in order to help the cause, or should I limit my outreach to my state only? Uh, do all of it. And as much as you can do. We know it's a hassle, but certainly do it if you can, and your voice will obviously add to the group of voices that are being done there. Nicholas says, do other consumer groups have strategies to prevent bans being slipped in at the last minute? Do your lobbyists have strategies to avoid this? There is no way that we could have known that. We had a lobbyist on the ground in Kentucky. The recommendation from a substance abuse group that got the ear of one state senator. He slipped it in because he could. He was the chair of, I think he was the chair of the committee, and it nailed us. There's no way we could have predicted. There was no rumors about it, no rumblings. We wish that we had a more perfected system. But what should have happened in Kentucky is they should have had a hearing and they should have done what the legislative process is supposed to do. And I think this is a powerful argument to the Kentucky governor. Not one hearing, not one public comment, and you had this snuck in at the last minute. So hopefully that'll be done as we go forward. Rand says, you mentioned potential clinical trials. I think in relation to the FDA, does this imply in any way an attempt to make the whole leaf kratom prescription only? There are not, to my knowledge, any clinical trials that are ongoing on metrogenine as a new drug application. I know that there is a proposal for a new drug application for a chemically modified and manipulated alkaloid related to kratom, but I don't think it has the sufficient funding yet to move forward. But natural kratom leaf products are not currently subject to a new drug application, or one that I'm aware of, along the way. The Illinois KCPA, Michael asked, what's the bill status for 4737? We're having a discussion about the various bills. We have reconciled the differences between the Global Kratom Coalition bill and the AKA's bill, and we're now working together on that. And so I think that we're going to be able to work on this. But then Michael says something that's very important. Even with KCPA enacted states, they're going to come back and ban years later, claiming there's problems. But it seems it's because they never enforce the law. Both things are true. The anti-kratom community is going to always be pushing hard in order to ban kratom. And so we're not safe just because we get a KCPA passed, but it certainly helps. And so we're going to be vigilant in this. So I think that's important, that we continue this fight and we continue to articulate that the KCPA needs to be funded. And then in the federal legislation, we are very much hoping that we are going to be able, in the federal legislation, to preempt these state laws, because that's really the only clear way to have a consistent enforcement policy along the way. Adam says, what do you say if a lawmaker today responds back and asks you where you live? Tell them where you live. If you're a vendor, tell them that you sell into that state. If you are a consumer, just tell them straight up. But you know people. You work with advocates every day in that state, which is true. So I think that's the way to do it. Stephen asked, how often is it productive to call email a legislator? Should we do it every so often or only one time? Does it backfire? It backfires if you do it yourself more than one time. Doesn't backfire if there are 500 or 1,000 or 10,000, as long as they're individualized along the way. James asked, any updates on the Illinois case? I just answered that. Or did Hart sufficiently muddy the waters there? The Hart group has certainly muddied the waters there, but we're fighting through it as we go forward. Jordan asked, do you even think NIDA will ever try and intervene in any states that are trying to ban kratom? No. Not their role. They're loath to do something like that. They are a scientific agency. They are not a lobbying agency. The only basis that they might be willing to consider is that if they make a statement that is misinterpreted, they might change the statement, but they're not going to do advocacy outreach. Misty asked, is there a DC flying date? I've already answered that. We're looking a couple days and we'll have it confirmed, hopefully tomorrow, but if not, the next day. David asked, is the problem 7OH and also Big Pharma and their lobbyists? Actually, I think our problem is with the 7OH manufacturers and less so with the pharma lobbyists. 7OH is a bigger threat to the pharma industry as kratom is, only more so. So I think that right now our problem is the 7OH community, and not so much the pharma people, my opinion. Mary asked, I also have a petition for plain leaf kratom going around called HB 5537, goes too far, stop Minneapolis kratom ban. Can I please get an endorsement for this petition from you? Send it to me and I'll look at it. And we can do that. We'll see if we can do that. But I'm inclined to do it. We'll see. Kevin says, I've had the pleasure to meet and lobby alongside you in a local county band in my state years ago, and I can't thank you. Oh, that's very kind. I'm not going to read this. Um, uh, would the lead scientist from the University of Florida, Dr. McCurdy, if I remember correctly, be willing to lobby for our natural leaf? It's not an appropriate role for Dr. McCurdy to be lobbying for the natural leaf. He can state accurately and concisely what the scientific evidence is that supports the difference between natural leaf kratom products. And certainly he was a co-author on the study done by the FDA dose finding study. So he can talk about that, he can describe it, but he's not appropriately going to be a lobbyist advocating for any specific bill. So I think that's the bottom line on that. Rand says, I'll put you on the spot. What has you optimistic about our marketplace and community going forward into 2027? Um, the advocates. I just believe in it, and I think that we really do have a vibrant community, despite what some critics say. And I think that once we sort out this 708 issue, hopefully done by the DEA, then I think we're going to have a smoother runway for us to get into federal legislation along the way. Elliot says, thanks for all you do. Curious, is Mike Lawler from New York one of the politicians in favor of the federal KCPA? Feels like I heard somewhere he can't find any info. We've talked to his office, to his staff. They have not bitten yet, but we also don't have a current federal KCPA, and that'll be the real test for us. Once we get that done, then we can go to a lot of these representatives' offices, and we'll need your help to do that. But Lawler, I think, in the discussions we've had with the staff, has been very open to this. And I know that our lobbyist in New York, David Carlucci, has been very helpful in that score too. Erica says, my elderly parents depend on natural kratom. I don't know what would happen to them if they didn't have it. Thank you. I hear that over and over and over again. And I'm an elderly guy and I depend on it. So I feel the pain. Jordan says, I leave for Thailand May 21st. I hope the dates work out for me. It will be me and my wife coming to Thailand. Great. Thailand, I was just there a couple of months ago. They're making significant advances. They're making significant progress on regulating it appropriately over there in terms of the harvesting and the processing. I think that's fabulous. Nick says, with the DA scheduling 708, will this clear up the situation in California with the health department's ban on natural leaf kratom? I think that the FDA changing their website is more important than the DEA, although it'll help with the DEA. I'm confident we're going to get to a resolution eventually. My understanding is the FDA is coming more our way on changing the language in the FDA and Kratom webpage, which has been a source of real consternation for us and confusion at the state level. Matt says, any word on what's happening in Michigan? I think I've answered that. Michigan, the Senate bill, I think, is going to give us a chance to really defeat that ban that was passed by the House. And you ask if there's time in the future for citizens to express their kratom stories in front of the Senate. Absolutely. There will be a hearing, and we hope that happens. Now, it's all dependent on scheduling and timing of these hearings, and so we have to see how that plays out. It may be this bill will die, and that'd be fine. We don't have to talk about it, but it certainly will be something that we will take advantage of. And you're right. We need to show a force, and thank you for your having the time and resources to help us on this kind of thing. Melanie, I think you've asked about the Paxton AG. I've already answered that. Dana says, is there are there any Kentucky specific groups I can join? You can join our group and we can point you in the right direction there along the way. Misty asked, is there anything popping off in North Carolina? The answer to that is that they are in a delay. Now they're in the budget process, but we are working behind the scenes, really pushing hard on getting the North Carolina across the finish line with our bill. But I think we're doing okay there. Rand asked, will a federal KCPI unravel any state bans? or is the hope that just the states will feel pressure and adjust? We would like to have, if we can get it, a federal preemption on all state laws. And that would help us. That's more difficult to do at a federal level because the states kick back. But it may be given the patchwork of confusion that the legislature, the Congress would see it that way. So I'm hoping that's the case. Um, Ron asked, can we not sue these kratom danger awareness people for putting out their lies and misinformation? Uh, I thought it was a fantastic action taken by Feel Free to sue the state of Utah on because of the false information that they relied upon. And I'm not sure I'm characterizing it completely correctly, but they're suing them about the legislation which is passed. And so I think that's a great first step. But I think we need to call out these people. I don't think that we can sue someone for expressing their First Amendment opinions about something. They certainly need to be held accountable for the accuracy of what they say. And you're right. I believe, in my opinion, they're putting out lots of lies and misinformation. So we're going to keep fighting there. Not sure that we can go so far as to sue them or if that's profitable. Dawn says, how do we go about the states that think they banned 7-OH in the tablets and the name changed to an energy tablet so they cannot accurately get numbers still for the natural kratom because apparently they do not know it's still out there in the states that ban 7-OH. This is an enforcement issue. It's real. We are working in, for example, in the state of Arizona right now to strengthen the existing KCPA to do exactly that. It's going to be a state by state approach. I think as there's more definition around the fact that 7-OH is a synthetic and chemically manipulated semi-synthetic product, that will get more enforcement actions along the way. Elliot says, how do you feel this current climate compares to 2016? Also, does anyone know what happened to the Kratom subreddit? I don't know that answer. That's where I get a lot of my info and notice it's been down. I don't know about the subreddit. I can tell you that this is different than 2016 because we have a lot more advocates, uh, albeit a different mix of advocates. So this is just one of those things that we have to work through. But I think that we've got a more inertia that's building at the state level because obviously we focused in 16 on a successful effort to undo the proposed kratom ban federally. So they're different, but we still have to work there. Jordan mentioned he meant that he hopes the dates work out so he can come to DC. I do too. And Jordan is a fabulous advocate, doing a documentary. I think it's terrific. Angel says the Kentucky governor just banned 7-OH without banning kratom itself. Does this give you confidence he will veto this ban? I'm not sure I understand that. There was a KCPA that was passed in Kentucky that did ban 7-OH, and it didn't ban kratom. The complaint from the group, as I understand it, that advocated for the ban on all kratom was because you can't tell the difference, can't enforce it. So that's part of the 7-OH problem, the disinformation problem. So that's, I think, the problem here. Ida says, I'm an 80-plus-year-old grandma, and I've been using natural kratom powder for nearly 10 years for chronic hip pain. I take it at night, about a tablespoon and a quarter cup of water. I'll be glad to write advocacy letters. I'm in Georgia, and I did send several emails when Georgia was discussing it. I don't know what happened in Georgia. Well, Ida, first, thank you. You're my hero, and you should keep sending those letters. What happened in Georgia is that there is a person who occupies a seat in the Georgia legislature, and his name is Rick Townsend. And he fancies himself to be this great consumer protector. He is a shill. He is a shill for the trial lawyers. And he can't even sit and give a straight answer to me about any recommendation I make because he said, well, let me think about that, which is code for him going back and asking his puppeteers and the trial lawyers whether he can agree to that or not. But here's something that's worse about Townsend. Uh, in the last legislative session, he was promoting a ban bill, and that ban bill was being defeated, and he knew it. And so he proposed a substitute bill in the committee. Now, on that particular morning, we're all sitting in the committee hearing, and he's up there to propose his substitute bill. There was a glitch in the internet service for the legislators. So the legislators who would typically have access to his substitute bill would pop up on their iPads, and we should be able to get it. It wasn't there. And so the committee chairman asked Rick Townsend, describe the differences between your substitute bill and the previous bill. And he glossed over a couple of things. It was a specific question. And the question was, tell us what your bill does that's different. And one of the differences was that Rick Townsend didn't tell the committee was that under his preferred substitute, his proposed substitute, was that kratom could not be sold in the state of Georgia unless it was grown and harvested in the United States. Now, you would think that would be a significant change. You would think that he ought to disclose the fact that that's an effective ban on all kratom products, but he didn't do it. Now, the good news is that I don't think that Rick Townsend colleagues think much of him because that bill died. Now, he likes to say, oh, it's because the lobbyist did me in. I think it's because of his deception, because we certainly alerted the committee chairman that he didn't tell the truth about this. And while I would like to give people the benefit of the doubt, even dumb legislators, I served in the legislature myself. I did some dumb things when I was in the legislature in the state of Utah 50 years ago. 45 years ago. I would like to think that they're all smart, and I get it. You can make mistakes. These mistakes don't appear to be unintentional mistakes. They appear to be deliberate and very disappointing for someone like Rick Townsend to stand up there and try to tell the people in Georgia that he's standing up for consumers. He's standing up for trial lawyers, and that's it. And I can't see any other pathway for a conclusion different to what I've just articulated along the way. Rand Holman, do you know much about the Louisiana ban reversal bill proposed by Beryl Amedee? Does it have a chance? I do. I've spoken with Representative Amedee a number of times. We think it's a terrific bill. Whether it has a chance or not is a question that we're going to have to see resolved in the legislature. It's a tough legislative body. This is where we had Representative Vehilo, who was the House sponsor of the ban bill, who, when asked in May of 2025, whether by a colleague, well, does your bill really address the synthetics or is it the natural? And she stood up and lectured her colleague and said, there is no such thing as a synthetic kratom product. No such thing. And anyone who told you that, and you tell the lobbyist who told you that I was born at night but not last night, there is no such thing as a synthetic kratom product. That's almost verbatim what she said. Now, of course, that was in May of 2025. On July 29th of 2025, Secretary Kennedy and Commissioner McCary stood up and said, we're banning this synthetic, semi-synthetic, and chemically manipulated 7-OH. I don't know what to say. Now, hopefully, I've met personally, along with the chairman of the AK, with the governor of Louisiana. He's willing to help us navigate the process to see if we can get to a good outcome. And then he might be inclined to help us when it comes to whether he would sign or have the issue of vetoing whatever the bill is. But in this case, it's a good bill that Representative Amedee is pushing. So Christopher asked, what can advocates do in the off season? Would it be good to tell advocates what they can do? For example, we would have passed the Idaho KCPA had we just had 30 to 60 days of pre-session advocacy. So first, Chris Diotis is the owner of Happy Hippo. He is a consummate consumer advocate as well as a vendor advocate. He blocked the ban with his team of advocates there in Idaho. It did a fabulous job because the police chiefs were out to ban it. They had this claim of a death that was allegedly associated with kratom, which turned out to be highly suspect, if not completely untrue. And but for Chris's efforts, we would have had a ban bill in Idaho. So thank you to Chris. In answer to the question, we should take advantage in the off season for every legislature to develop a strategy to go and talk to them. There's less pressure when your state representative or state senator is working in their districts, working their everyday job. Most state legislators are not full time. So it's a great idea to get out there and we'll do something to develop a sort of guidebook on what you can do in the time period between sessions. Chris, thanks for recommending it. I think it's a great idea. Misty says Claudia wants to do a peaceful protest in front of Brandeis University because of Andrew Kolodny. So a couple of things here. Misty, thank you. Misty is one of the great advocates of all time, and she references Claudia Morandi, who is not a Kratom consumer, but has been a great consumer advocate in Rhode Island, and she nationally has a huge footprint in advocating for pain patients. And Andrew Kolodny, if you don't know who he is yet, you need to know him because he is now plotting, and I mean plotting, in order to get into the kratom space in the same way that he ruined the lives of so many pain patients that were being maintained appropriately on the right levels of opioid medications that they needed. And he was the champion of the pharma industry, the critics about opioids, and he cut off through his lobbying efforts the adequate amount of medication that people needed, and he thrust people into serious issues, including suicides and deaths that never should have occurred. Andrew Kolodny is a problem. When I confronted him, because he showed up at the Fifth International Kratom Conference, University of Florida, and he's walking around like he's just one of us. And I knew who he was, and I confronted him. And we had a very unpleasant conversation in the lobby there over an extended period of time at that conference. He is not a person that understands the reality of what consumers are experiencing, and he doesn't care because it's about him collecting fees to testify in wrongful death cases that he's now targeting for kratom. So he's going to become a champion of the trial lawyers, and he's certainly no consumer champion. So good on Claudia for her efforts. We're going to be doing some podcasts in the near future, webinars with her group, with Claudia and some of the team that she's built. They are fierce advocates. We honor them, and we're going to help them in their effort in the same way they're helping us there. Claudia has stood shoulder to shoulder with me up in Rhode Island, was one of the main driving forces in getting the Rhode Island legislature to actually repeal their ban on kratom because she spoke so eloquently and forcefully on behalf of kratom consumers there. Uh, Michael says, I keep hearing states say it's too hard to regulate, or they claim they don't have the resources to examine or differentiate the alkaloid level concentration of leaf versus pure 7-OH. It's frustrating to hear the guys say TBI is incapable of testing. Where do you go with this? Well, I've exposed him. I've sent letters to all the committee members indicating that not only was his answer false when he said that we don't have the testing equipment, there are multiple agencies in the state of Tennessee that have the requisite testing equipment. What they may not have is the kratom method that needs to be installed in the software section of it's an update into that machinery. He did not tell the truth. This is a top law enforcement agency in the state of Tennessee who was not being truthful about what the circumstances were with respect to the testing capability of Tennessee law enforcement agencies. And so that's just something that we're going to have to fight on a case by case basis, call them out when it's necessary. And I'm doing it, and we'll continue to do it as we go forward here. Um, let's see. Adam says, is there any way for us to get the NMI under control? What's the NMI, Adam? I'm sorry, I'm brain dead on NMI. The acute metrozine toxicity thing is a major problem. Um, Somebody tell me what NMI means. See, I'm stumped. If we're talking about the medical examiners, this is just getting them to follow the correct procedures. If we're talking about the research that was just done uh, by the CDC for the report, I think that one's called the MMDR. That's medical examiners reporting. They even acknowledge when you read the actual report that the spike in poison control exposure reports and in the addiction levels and overdoses um, is really attributable to the 7-OH and its advent. And Adam says, okay, NMS Labs. Um, so the good news about NMS Labs is that they published a peer-reviewed study where they acknowledged, it's called the PAPSM study, where they acknowledged that they don't know if there is a toxic level of metrogenine concentration that would cause an overdose death. What they do say is that anything at 1,000 nanograms per milliliter that shows up in the bloodstream of a decedent is a cause for concern. That's fine. And as long as the medical examiners view that in context, that will be fine. But unfortunately, you have medical examiners that get on a call with their National Medical Examiners Association, and someone says, "Oh, watch out for kratom." And that person that's telling them to watch out for kratom doesn't make the distinguishing difference between 7-OH and kratom, then they're going to be watching out for kratom. And that's a problem. But NMS Labs has actually been fairly responsible in this, although I think that they should look more closely at the results of what's going on, and then be able to evaluate in context exactly what the toxic level of kratom is. If there isn't one, say that definitively, and the 1,000 nanograms per milliliter probably needs to be adjusted. Now, I'll tell you that the NMS lab expert told me that his concern is that 7-OH is so unstable that depending on when the autopsy is done, it's possible that it has literally washed out of the bloodstream. So what you'll have is a very low level of metrogenine, which is not unstable, and they'll see the death, and instead of 1,000 nanograms per milliliter, maybe medical examiners and coroners will be misled into thinking, oh, well, there's nothing else in their system, it's only metrogenine, and it's at 400 nanograms per milliliter. And so maybe that number will come down, not because of the truth of the matter, but because of the instability of 7-OH, in terms of the way it is evaluated in postmortem toxicology screens. So big concern for us, and it's worthy of some additional discussion along the way. So we're just going to have to keep fighting on that. Chris, and I think this is our last question. In the Senate hearings, which do you find more impactful, testimony from statistical experts or from individual consumers? While one provides data and structure, the other provides personal narrative and emotional resonance. This is a great question. My opinion doesn't mean much, because to one senator, the emotional tug that comes with a consumer that says, kratom changed my life, saved my life, those are powerful. Now, my opinion is that when that constituent is from the district of the senator or the representative, it makes a lot more difference, because what I have seen consistently is that where we see kratom ban bills pop up, it's been because there is a constituent that lives in the district of the sponsor of the ban bill. That was true in CJ's law in New Jersey. It was true in Tennessee right now, where you've got the Matthew Davenport law. It was true in Idaho. So I think that it's a cross-cutting issue, and we need to have the data. Data is important, and for the broad strokes, being able to produce data that contradicts the claims that are made by a family about the death of a loved one. I can tell you that the Matthew Davenport law, as much as it was drawn from the data that was provided in an autopsy report, when you looked at the autopsy report, this kid, I'm talking about the Tennessee death, this kid had a toxic level of Benadryl in his system, had a very low level. I think it was 800 nanograms per milliliter, below the level of concern identified by NMS Labs. So that's our conundrum. And yet you'll have a mother who will swear on a Bible that, oh, it was kratom that did my kid in, because that's popular, because it gives Esther Helton, whatever her name is, the sponsor, some talking point to yell about. It's not accurate, and it's really astoundingly undocumented. So I can't answer the question as specifically as I would like, but I think it works both ways. But a local constituent who's had a positive experience with kratom will have a dramatic impact on that legislator, and certainly that'll help. But when one legislator stands up and says, "I got this kid in a constituent of mine whose kid died of kratom," then that impacts everyone. That's where you have to have the data that comes in behind and says, "No, that's not accurate," and hopefully we'll win the day. And we have won the day on most of this. I'll say this again, and I'm going to emphasize it as much as one can emphasize it. Anyone who believes that we wouldn't be at 25 or more states this year with a Kratom Consumer Protection Act, but for the 7OH, is wrong. And anyone who believes that they can have this wishy-washy, "Oh, I just don't want anything to be banned, and I'm going to live and let live, and I can let anybody use whatever they want," then that's working against the natural plant being preserved in the marketplace and consumer access being protected, because that's the basis that the 7OH people are trying to sell their nonsense. And those advocates that are advocating for that there's no middle ground. You can't be on both sides of this issue. And anyone who suggests that you can doesn't understand the political landscape nor the policy landscape that impacts the ability for a kratom consumer to have access to natural kratom leaf products that are safely formulated and properly labeled. Because it won't matter. Because you've got law enforcement people saying, "I can't tell the difference." You've got medical examiners saying, "I can't tell the difference." And you've got these crazy advocates who out there trying to act like, "Oh, we're just trying to be what's right for everybody." Look behind those statements. I'm going to do a video maybe later tonight, but maybe tomorrow, where we talk more about the 7OH Gals podcast. It was deeply disappointing to me because of the way that, on a couple of levels, one about the way they excused the 7OH entry into the marketplace, and then unfortunately the accusation that was made about the fierceness of the advocates in the United States on kratom, because every day there are experiences that contradict the nonsense that was promoted by a group called the BAE. I can tell you that it wasn't true, is not true, and I can tell you that that BAE representative who said that the kratom advocacy community was not doing its job, and pointed her finger and said, "You get off your butts." This is a woman who had 7 opportunities in the state of Montana, where she lives, where legislative hearings, Board of Pharmacy hearings, and interim committee hearings, and she wasn't at any one of them. And for her to say, "You need to get off your butts," well, I don't know, 4 fingers are pointing back at you. And so, yeah, I got upset about that. And I know that I'm taking a little bit of criticism because, if, for example, the Madeline Sklar, who leads up the Kratom Gals, I call them the 7OH Gals, my opinion, that she's upset with me because she said, "Oh, maybe it's because we're women." Well, that's all that's on that podcast. But if anybody thinks, and I'm only saving my criticism for women, I don't know. Ask Rick Townsend if that's true. Ask Vince Sanders if that's true. Ask Jonathan Miller from the Heart Group if that's true. Ask Nick Smith if that's true. This is nonsense. And I think that what we need to do is stay true to the actual messaging that we have. Understand that we can't be the savior to everyone, but we have a right to protect access to natural kratom leaf products identified by the FDA finally as being safe, and not to be drugged down by the 7OH community. So I think that is something that we're gonna have. And Ron's just making the suggestion that we have a national advocacy coordinator. We actually do. We are being overwhelmed by the number of the ban bills that are out there, both at the state and local level. And so we're playing catch up everywhere we can. We're doing the very best that we can. We're getting to as many hearings as we can. And so I think that we're doing the best we can. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to try harder and that we won't be more effective, in terms of being able to articulate our message in advocacy and recruiting and training advocates. Like I said, we're going to put out a guidebook for how you can be a more effective advocate. I think that's a great suggestion. It comes from this meeting. So I think that that's right. I know we're going to continue with a lot of other stuff, but let me say thank you to all of you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being a part of this. Thank you for being engaged in this community. And we'll do the best we can. I am not going to be supported in everything that I say personally. I had an extended phone call today from an advocate in Texas who was infuriated with me, and unfortunately the phone cut off, and I didn't have his phone number to call back, and I don't know whether that was intentional or not, but it was a spirited conversation. But he was essentially saying that I was just going after the 7OH people unnecessarily, and that I ought to shut my mouth on those kind of things, and then accusing me of being this corrupt person for being this lobbyist. And it is true. I'm a lobbyist. I'm required to register in the federal government and in the states when I show up in some of the states where I show up to advocate. I'm also a consumer and an advocate, and I try to wear those hats where it's appropriate. I don't hide from it. He said, "Well, yeah, but you also get paid by the AK to lobby." That's true, I do. Uh, and I hope that the value that I'm providing to the AK is one that will deliver results. And I told this individual, I said, the board can fire me at any time. They have that right to do so. And of course, he didn't agree with that. So anyway, we can have legitimate areas of disagreement, but we ought to come together on one thing, and that is that we ought to take steps in order to protect the access to natural leaf kratom products, and that we ought to fight against anything that intrudes on that space and gets in the way and ends up in the condition we're currently in of fighting bans that are initiated solely because of the confusion that was introduced by 7OH and other synthetic products along the way. So there we said it. I deeply appreciate all of you. I thank you for taking the time to be with us. I know we've lost a couple of people, but not many. And so thank you for staying in for the duration. And we're grateful for all that you do. We appreciate it. Thanks so much.